Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the show. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different because a few days ago I was invited by Indic Academy to actually host an event for them, and I hosted a panel discussion on the topic of success and identity in America and how Indian values and Indic values can help contribute to American life, American society, and Western society in general. So it was a very fun discussion and a panel discussion to host for me. First and foremost, I was indebted and honored and very pleased to be invited by Indic Academy, and I must thank Mr. Avatans Kumar, who is the head of Indic Academy in the United States, for inviting me. It was a lot of fun for me. So I'm presenting now the full video of our panel discussion. I really hope that you like it as well. Please let me know your comments in the comment section down below, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you. And we're noticing certain things, things like this aggressive, I guess you could say, materialism, this aggressive, almost partisanship that you see, that there's no middle ground anymore. There's no place for dialogue anymore. It's very my way or the highway. You're looking at things along the lines of foreign interventionism, which is like, all right, everybody in the world needs to follow their government or their social life exactly the way we do, rather than the idea of, all right, that's their system of operating, and as long as their system of operating is not causing any significant harm to me or their own people, then maybe it's okay for them to maybe exist that way. So I was thinking around like more along those lines of, some problems that you probably see.
Okay, yeah, I think I got it this time. I think what we're looking at is very essential to Hinduism. And that thing is self. We look at the world and we see the world could be theocentric, organized around religion. Yeah. Then there are anthropocentric, where we have to work for the whole humanity, and some of the ideologies like liberalism, Marxism come under that. But Hinduism is self-centric, not self-centered, but self-centric, because it probes us to look inside. What can I do? What can I do to better ourselves first? And imagine if everybody can do better, then we are all better. So I think that's one of the essential in my view. And the other one is respect, mutual respect for what I think, what you think, and what everybody else think. The moment we say, like, my way or highway, there is always a room for conflict. But when we say, okay, I respect what you think or what you do, as long as it's mutual, I think we can work together. Right. Does that answer?
Yeah, no, definitely it does. And Sundharji, I want to get to you as well. Like, do you yourself, having lived in the US as long as you have, is there something that you notice particularly that sticks out for you, or that you think is something that, when we're talking about Indic values, Indic philosophy, is something that in your, from your point of view is a pain point that it could possibly address?
Perhaps I could, in fact, perhaps I could also respond to that question. Sure. Yeah, because, okay, I think I want to compare the US and to Indian value. One good way is to actually see the effects, how they played out in history. Okay, Sheldon Pollock is one of the persons who's also very controversial. He's written a very good book. I mean, I've got some poems in, which is on the language of the gods in the world of men. And he actually contrasts the Sanskritic, what he calls the Sanskritic cosmopolis, which was basically the whole of Asia. Because, I talk about Buddhism and Hinduism, but actually it was, both of them by that time were using Sanskrit. Buddhists started out by rejecting Sanskrit, but later, so it was a Sanskritic culture, which was admired all across Asia, even China and other places like that. And he contrasts that with Rome. And he shows how the Roman Empire basically was based on the force of arms. He goes into much more detail, but since you're talking about peace. Whereas in India, it's quite the opposite. Most Indians didn't even know these countries existed. But yet people from these countries, from Java to so many other countries, they were eager. So it was a pull mechanism. So there was a greater India, not because Indian, there were some things like the Cholas and everything, which were purely for material reason, not for proselytizing, because of trade routes. All these countries were very eager to have, and even now, I have recently in China and other places, they have so much respect for Indians. When they see you in a temple, they want to be photographed with you. I mean, I have this experience, but so just a couple of years ago. So that is that. So actually, it's been more interesting from Pollock as an American to compare India with America, because you're talking about foreign interventionism and all of that. And actually, America, you see, Swami Vivekananda, I said he loved about America freedom. And I think he really believed in the founding principle of this country, which is different from any other country. It's a very conscious founding. No other country has been founded in such a self-conscious way as this country, People at the very beginning had some idea what they were doing, coming together around. But look at the way freedom is used. This freedom has become an excuse for war. This culture has become predatory. It is predatory within itself. The way people's relationships with each other, you can see the way politics is polarized, how low the politics has sunk. And it is no accident that somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who is saying, bring back the troops, spend the money here, no foreign intervention, is somebody who inspires herself from Hinduism. So this is one reason why I say it's not an accident, in my opinion. It's a cycle coming right from Swami Vivekananda.
Yeah, and Raji as well, it sort of speaks to that point of, there's an idea in Western philosophy which sort of looks at the earth as, God made the earth as man's property to exploit. And so they view the earth more as overlords of it, whereas Indic traditions look at the earth more as, we're part of it. It's more organic. If the earth is better, we are better. So, and I feel like that explains to a large extent as well how we see how India has behaved over the past thousands of years in its behavior with other cultures around it, and how certain other cultures have behaved with relation to other cultures around it, where they've looked to suppress it, where they've looked to control it. And India, by and large, has been not an expansionist civilization at all. So, in the current climate of how countries are dealing with each other, there are some lessons there, right?
Right. So in my talks, I state a statement. I say that in today's contemporary world, reducing your karmic footprint is equal to reducing your carbon footprint. And we need to be very aware of that. I understand the world is even polarized, whether human activity is causing the global warming and other such things, but keeping that aside, we understand that what the other speaker said, I agree completely, there's a different angle on that one, that materialism is causing technology to overuse resources of the earth, which is perhaps giving rise to what the scientists, the 15,000 scientists that I talked about, who are saying that all indicators are going down. What is our role in this activity? There's a question that Hindus, Indians, Indic people need to internalize very, very deeply to try and understand the role. And I believe it's karma. Everything, I have a choice. At every instant I have a choice. I can choose to drive a gas guzzler going from the airport to here, or I could tell him, give me your best fuel-efficient car. I could do that also, right? And I know I'm causing a problem, but let me try to reduce that carbon footprint. So as a Hindu today, I can make many conscious choices that will help me to reduce the resources of Earth. That said, I'd like to give an anecdote, if I may. So this question, unfortunately, is posed as a theological issue. The fact that Abrahamic theology is God made man in his image, and therefore is a pinnacle of perfection, and also put him in charge of all creation to do as he likes, which has been interpreted today's world as You can do anything. These things you can take. Mohammedanism has got something saying that this is forbidden, that is not forbidden.
Do you feel like that plays into the whole idea of, the opposition to man's impact on the climate, that if it was made for us and if we were supposed to be overlords of it, how can it run out of resources?
Absolutely, and that is the thinking that leads to denying climate change. That's the kind of thinking that denies climate change. I'm completely aware that that kind of activity is happening. I had a conversation with a preacher in the New Delhi International Terminal. Was it T2 or T3? Forget the number.
I think it's T3.
T3.
International.
So I had 5 hours overlay, and my daughter was wearing a UT Austin t-shirt. So an American preacher came and sat next to me. You're from UT Austin? I'm from Austin too. And I started talking. He didn't know what he was getting into. And we had a pretty long conversation where I deconstructed the Abrahamic thinking, how resources have been done. And
he really did not know what he was getting into.
and what our Indic way is doing this. He gave me a beautiful answer. He listened. We had about 3-4 hours of conversation, but he gave me a beautiful line which I believe can be the basis for a dialogue. He said the fact that the Abrahamic God has said man is in charge of creation doesn't give license to rape the earth. Rather, it's a stewardship of the earth. It's a conscientious stewardship of the earth that can be reinterpreted. And that's an instance of them reversing the case, taking our technology, our thinking, and imbibing it and acculturating it to themselves. An instance of that, but it's for the positive. So when you said, what are the Indic values that can impact American contemporary life? I believe this is one of them. If you can tell them, look, with your theology, this is not a clash of civilizations. Your theology, God put you in charge. You have a stewardship, right? You can't just go over doing that. Scientists are saying is denying climate change and these kinds of things. In our thinking, reducing carbon footprint is equal to karmic footprint. If you don't want to accept karma, this is our thinking, but you could do this and improve the earth. And that way you're following God's commandment, that you're in stewardship of creation. So,
right, I mean, it's a good point, but at the same time, I feel like, you're talking about the acculturation that happens and they can imbibe certain ideas, even though they have to take it into the Abrahamic mold and, mold it to their thinking. That's fine as long as it's an idea for positive change. But do you think that that can still lead to, we talk about mutual respect a lot when we talk from an Indic perspective. Do you think that idea, that acculturation can still lead to mutual respect? Because what you notice in a lot of cases is you take the idea, but the respect isn't there. You take the idea and you're like, okay, it's mine now. And I still hate you, but this idea is mine now and I'm keeping it. So, Dr. Visualingam, I wanted to get back to you with that. Like, the imbibing is happening, but the mutual respect isn't necessarily. And what would it take for that to happen?
And first of all, I agree with you, this is happening. And actually the person who has done the most to show this is somebody else, Rajiv Malhotra.
Mike.
I have worked closely with him on some of his books. Unfortunately, he has not yet published his book, which I worked with him a lot. It's what's called a U-turn theory. That's how I first met him. At first I was a bit skeptical, but then as I went into all the examples, and I know what he's talking about. For Indology, I say basically it's theft. Oil. Knowledge is also theft. You talked about that thing at Oxford, no? Coldbrook, what is that? The Oxford, what's his name? William Jones.
Yes.
So it belongs to William Jones, and it doesn't belong to the Pandits who took it from at his feet. This is basically it, patenting traditional knowledge from the Amazons and this and that. So these people can no longer sell it. So this is what I meant by predatory at every level, even at the intellectual level, etc. What was the question, by the way?
The question was that the theft, let's say, is happening, the imbibing is happening, but the mutual respect is
not there. On the contrary, one of the things that Rajiv Malhotra talks about 5 stages of the U-turn, and this is connected with age also. The young student goes to India, then he comes back, and then slowly he starts, because he's attracted by some things in India. And he comes back, he begins to see a bigger picture, and he can't accept, etc. Finally, he says, this is all mine, So this happens at the individual level, happens at traditional level. Christians, we have yoga right from the beginning, things like that.
I don't know if you've seen that monstrosity they call faith yoga these days. Have you?
No.
It's like, apparently you do this in like I've seen a couple of these churches that they do this faith yoga.
Yeah.
It's an incredible thing, done with a straight face.
So in fact now there's a whole movement, and there's somebody very close to Witzel who's also doing it, this guy, what's his name, he's American, runs that forum. Yoga itself, they're saying, is actually all recent invention, put together, and you can see a big discussion. Entire books have been written on this. So the problem with Hindus is till now they have been very proud. Oh, they have taken it, see, we are so great. They don't know what is really going on. So they're digesting all the essence and then spitting out the thing and saying that's lost. See? So people have to wake up and see. I recommend you don't have to agree with everything that Haji Malhotra says, but he's the first person to speak up very boldly. Read him for yourself, because he could have easily been just a very rich millionaire here, but he took early retirement and devoted his life to this. So you owe it to him to actually look how this whole phenomenon works. And there's one thing I want to mention about scarcity of resources. See, like even in Europe, because of small land, population, there was war. The Europeans are very conscious of scarcity. The Americans are completely imprinted by the idea of the frontier, ever receding frontier, plentiful. Go there, there's gold, there's new land. You see? Now the whole country has been overrun. So the new Indians have become Middle Eastern, sand diggers. So that mentality is there. They come out. You see what they said about Venezuela? What did Bolton say about Venezuela? Oh, the oil, we will look after the oil for you. They are doing in Libya and all of that. So this mentality, unfortunately, I think on the one side you have to criticize, and unfortunately I think, and this I said that at the University of Chicago in a public meeting. This was when Ghosh, what's his name was, right? Amitabh Ghosh was speaking. The only language you will ultimately understand is brute force with moral backing. And this is why they are so terrified of Vladimir Putin.
Interesting. Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, is it a question of just brute force, or is it a question of, I think, when we're talking about mutual respect, I understand the idea that you're saying about brute force, because Ramdhari Singh Dinkar had a very interesting poem that way as well.
Not in itself. It cannot be just brute force, but then just descend into violence.
Sure.
With a very strong moral measures, and people can see, what it is really about.
Yeah, and it's more of I almost feel like it's more of a question of confidence, because it brings me to an idea where in my time that I've spent here in the US, interacting with the Indian diaspora whenever I get the chance, one of the things that I noticed is not meek, really, I don't think that's the right word, but they almost go out of their way not to stand out.
Apologetic.
Yeah, it's almost like they're assimilating to a fault, and assimilating is a great thing. That's what makes, I feel, in my opinion at least, that's what makes Indians such good immigrants in general.
Yes.
But I think they go out of their way to assimilate to a fault where they almost are too ready to relinquish any sort of sense of identity that they may have. So when you're talking about, why do the people in the West or in America don't know anything about Hindus, it's because Hindus will go out of their way not to talk about it. So Avatans, do you see that in your own experience, or is that just mine?
No, I do see that, but the problem, I think, you will talk about Hindu or your identity if you know it. Well, we are not taught, at least I wasn't, I went to a government school, high school also. You're not taught about your Vedas or Puranas or Upanishads or Ramayana or Mahabharata. These things are not there. There are certain problems, definitely the problems are there because we don't know about these things. I learned everything from my grandma, my parents. I didn't know the logic behind it, I didn't know the reason, I didn't understand a lot of things, but that's where I learned. I remember when I was a child, my father was a very, very, he was influenced by Swami Vivekananda. Or at least he thought that it's good for kids to know about Swami Vivekananda. Okay, so he was a disciple of Swami Ramakrishna Paramhans. Okay, disciple in the sense that he would read quite a bit about him. So we had Roma Raman and all that right from the beginning, and he would. One of our job as kids were to memorize some of his, one or two of his quotations every day. Okay, so that gave us some idea about our culture, our religion. I'm not a very deep, religious person in the sense that the rituals and all those things, but hey, I'm very confident about my identity and very conscious about my identity as well. But I think for that you have to know. The other thing is we are taught to be very apologetic about yourself. Because the moment you talk about Hinduism, you talk about caste system and how bad it is and how discriminatory it is and how many people, you threw the whole society out of, outside the bounds of the villages and things like that, how many people you killed, and my God, you think about it and you're like, where did it come from? And that's where, when I was talking about the disconnect also that comes from it, because when I'm learning from my grandparents, I don't see these things. I had people of all kind coming to our house, including people from different religions. Okay, we had different, people who came and worked in our house. We had kinship terms from them. So ex-mama, ex-mausa, ex-mausi. That's how we had. And I didn't know until I got to Delhi University, and suddenly there was a Mandal Commission, and I knew that there was lots of caste and there was this kind of discrimination that I didn't know about. So that's the disconnect it was. So I'm discovering those. When I came to this country, I also got exposed to a lot of literature, also thanks to internet as well, and in interactions with different kind of, all kinds of scholars and academics and so on. It kept poking me that, okay, no, I gotta investigate this. And when I learned all those things, I investigated those things, and I said, no, this is completely not true. Does that answer something?
No, it definitely does. I think, it's a very good point as well about people not knowing enough about their own culture. And I really think that in a lot of cases people, especially since we're talking about, identity and success in America, talking about the American diaspora and the Hindu diaspora based in the US, in a lot of cases I've noticed, at least, again, this is from my interaction, that the first generation immigrants that come here, either they just don't do it because they don't think it's important, or they almost go out of their way not to educate their children. The first generation Americans that are growing up now, Indian Americans, they don't tell them about what their culture is, what this is, they just say, okay, go ahead and assimilate, which is a very good quality. I'm not negating that at all. I think it's a very good thing for parents to say, you're in this country now, make an effort to assimilate. But at the same time, these kids that are growing up in the United States, they're growing up with a BuzzFeed idea of what Hindus are, like whatever they're watching on YouTube, on these, MTV idea of what Hinduism and Hindus are. They're not getting it from the source, they're not getting it from the parents. So I don't know what it is. Is it, Raj, do you think is it a case of that the parents don't know, or is it a case of the parents just being like, I don't want to teach my kids this, and it's hurting, I think, the cause of that, the interaction of Hinduism with American society that we're talking about, it's hurting that cause. Do you think it's more of a question of they don't know, or they're just not taking that personal responsibility?
I think from the data points, at least which I have, I would think it's ignorance. It's ignorance coupled with deep attempts to control the identity and control of the identity of the parents during their studentship days. So growing up in India, if you can think that the parents of today's American teenagers, first generation, if you can put them in their 70s growing years, 70s and 80s, They grew up in a toxic India. They grew up in an India where they were distanced from much of their rituals, their sources, their understanding, and their parents too were victims of that. We sometimes think we just have 1 or 2 generations away from this deracination, but that's not true. It goes back all the way to Macaulay. It goes back all the way to Macaulay and perhaps even beyond that. Deracination started there. Deracination started when the traditional Jati system occupation was gone. Deracination started when they said jobs will only be provided to people who know English, and by the way, preference given to Anglo-Americans or Anglo-Indians, or Christians and so on. That caused the movement of people to take up jobs of this nature and move away from the traditional. That deracination started people questioning themselves, what is the practice that we're doing? Does it even make sense? That knowledge is gradually lost generation by generation. So maybe even by your great-great-grandfather's time, deracination had set in. So Dr. Sunthar asked a question provocatively on, is Hinduism constant? No, it has been. Is Hinduism constant? I think Hinduism is, I don't know if we can deconstruct every word there, but the point is that the practice of Hinduism or our understanding of Hinduism has continually been on a downward decline, I would say. Downward because we have devalued more and more of what connected people to their philosophies. Maybe your great-grandmother or grandmother would have actually done puja at home. She'd have every day done puja, every day done certain activities. Maybe your great-grandmother and grandfather would have done some ritual things every day as part of their, who they were. That was their identity. But those practices gradually changed. Either expediency or ignorance or a combination of both. And like I told you, when we do our textbook review in India, and we look at the textbook content, what is there are deeply toxic words over there, put in such a way that it makes the Hindu child feel small, ashamed of their culture, and gives an impression that they were nothing. Everything came to them from outside. Anything of value came from outside. All their systems are probably of not of value. So these are the values which the parents that you see today of American teens grew up with. The lucky ones deracinated, they were deconstructed themselves, and maybe they're hoping to get part of their identity. But there are great many people who don't have the resources. They don't have the resources.
Yes, if I may add something. I have a slightly different take. I'm not negating what you said, but I think there are different sections of the population. You see, since 2012, I have worked a lot with the Chicago media, many different media outlets. I've done a lot of going hands-on reporting, Hindu community a lot, majority, also with Muslim, Jain, a wide variety of different communities, including Hindu temple here. I come here, artistic events, Kathakali, these that do write-ups or send people. And what I've been seeing is that actually there's a large section, especially the Brahmins, very conservative. In fact, they are, and I see their traditional families handing down to their children mastery of veena, music, dance. It's full of admiration because there's very strong conservatism, and I think that in many families here, they are even more conscious of what they have after coming here, So they practice it among them. Outside they may be IT people or this or that. They adjust, but when they come back, it's very clear that what they treasure and enjoy the most is those traditions which, In fact, I myself, Elizabeth and I left India. We lived in India more than 16 years. So I left, we left here, I came here in 89. So we were very nostalgic for India. We would have preferred to remain if we could, but it's a long story. And so this was like a substitute doing media work here. We had to be with, and not just with the Hindus. I've covered Muharram here, I've covered Sunni, Muslim festival, even covered Pakistani events. I think that the South Asian community here as well is actually quite conservative, very attached to their traditions. Not necessarily, in an aggressive way. I mean, I covered many Pakistani events, very well treated. They were very eager for me to come and cover them and all of that. So this is something common, but especially for the Hindu community. Here, I think there's another factor at work. For many Hindus, and not just Hindus, but Indian Christian, Parsis, etc. So they've come here and they've made their life here. And they've been hugely, some of them have come with only a few dollars in their pocket. I know many, some of them are very rich. But they came here very hard, but they could not have done this in any other country. So they feel a very great sense of loyalty and gratitude to this country. They love this country as much as they love India. And that's a very good thing. Yeah. But does it mean supporting America in every way? You know? This is why I think Tulsi Gabbard needs to shake up all these people. If you want it to be good to give back to this country, make sure it goes back in its right path.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I see shades of what both of you are saying. In fact, what Raj was saying was something that resonates with me very much personally, because my family has had that journey. My dad, when he was a young man, he was a devout communist. He grew up, in a public school, grew up hanging out with his Lal Salam friends, and devout communist. But he got lucky in the sense that he said, he used to hear certain things and he didn't just take them at face value. He said, okay, this doesn't sound right. Let me at least take a look and see if this is right or not. And that is what led him on his journey of sort of rediscovery, so to say, of his traditions and of his culture. And, it percolated down to me because then he helped educate me. Otherwise, I would have been, pretty much down the road that he went when he was younger. So, that part of what you're talking about, Rathee, definitely resonates in my personal experience. And yeah, you're right as well, Sundharji, as in where you see a lot of Hindus in India that are very proud of their traditions, that hang on to their traditions, and that make sure that their kids grow up understanding those traditions as well. Here. My apologies. And so do you think that it's just a question of that, A, there's a little bit of them, the ignorance that Raji was talking about, and B, there's a little bit of, they hang on to it, but that's it. It's a very sort of enclosed affair. There's almost there's no talking about it outside of the home, discussion of it with their friends in any way. It's a very tightly airtight affair.
It's a kind of a ghetto they form for themselves to retain the thing. And the thing is, the question is they need to ask themselves how long this can go on. You see, for example, I come here, I enjoy a lot of Carnatic music, Hindustani music, dance, Veena. I come and see, I cover events where the small children play, and etc. But even this ghetto thing is under threat. And it is under threat from within. Just a couple of months ago, have you heard of T.M. Krishna?
Yes.
He was here. Yes. And I was invited by the University of Chicago to come and cover him. So of course I have heard about him, maybe heard a little bit, but I didn't know much about the controversies. So he's a Brahmin. He comes from that kind of Brahmin. He's a very good singer. There was a big debate in my forum. And now the Rajiv Malhotra's latest Swadeshi Indologist conference was about this. Because after this debate, some of people associated with him in the Infinity Foundation in India, actually in my group, and so they were arguing and this thing. Because I was partly defending him, partly, not fully. In fact, with him here in the University of Chicago, I was very, yes, in front of other people. So he is ridiculing. He's ridiculing. They invite him to come and sing, and he ridicules them. So they are now under siege from within. The people like him, who are Brahmins, completely brought up in strictly and very good, mastered. So he has the art behind him. Sang at the University of Chicago. He inaugurated the thing for world music in the University of Chicago. And it was basically a deconstruction of Carnatic music, using Carnatic music against itself. Right. That was what he did. It was actually quite brilliant. It only reminded me of my brother, but anyway, that's another story. So the lot of people, is accusing them of being hypocrites, of this, that, of putting the he's attacking Brahminism as a whole, and it's coming from somebody who's a pakka Brahminist. So really, we need to start thinking. You cannot afford to now think intellectually what is happening to us, what is our situation, what are the threats, can we ignore it, etc. And when somebody like Rajiv Malhotra makes a lot of noise, don't start criticizing him by, see, one of the things when he started doing, he was attacked by the Hindus.
Yeah.
Oh, why are you bringing so much of negative attention? I was constantly. More I mention, you say, oh, bad fellow. Don't, I mean, he has his backside, but, but he's done a job which only he has done, yes.
And so we're talking about, the need for asserting ourselves, I think our ideas a little bit more. And now we're seeing that to an extent, Avatans, right? We're seeing people, excelling in commerce. You're looking at them excelling in the science fields, as business leaders. And now, we're also seeing, and Sundharji mentioned that as well, that we're also seeing them emerge as political leaders. They're getting involved in politics more and more. That's a more recent phenomenon. So you're seeing them assert themselves a little bit more, but it's still a very colorless assertion. It's still they're Indians in these fields, but it's not like, okay, we're Hindus in this field. We're just like people from a Hindu-Indian background in this field. So I think, in a time in the United States where there's, the increased acceptance of diversity, increased acceptance of pluralism, increased acceptance of tolerance and mutual respect and listening to each other when people are talking about how these qualities are very important. And you have a culture and you have a philosophy that embodies these principles so well. I think it's really time. The time is right now for Hindus to assert themselves and assert their culture and philosophy in this way. And what do you think needs to happen for that to come to the forefront? Is it more of a question of just, do you think it's something that will just happen organically, or do you think that families in educating their children need to take that personal responsibility?
It's a tough question, but going back to what we were talking about, I have seen that people, first of all, you have to think that when I say I'm a Hindu, doesn't mean I'm anti something, okay? Or even if I say
that's an important distinction, right?
Even if I say I'm pro-Hindu, doesn't make me anti-Hindu. Or if I'm a pro-life, that doesn't make me anti-life. To put it in the US perspective here. So we have to keep that in mind. And again, I will go back to our education system, the way we have been taught. The moment we talk about Hinduism, that is seen as attacking somebody else, because that was the whole premise of not teaching us about our own culture, because Mahasabha will come, all right? Hindu Mahasabha will come, or the RSS will become stronger. So that we never had those kind of reconciliation that we talk about. I mean, I talked to some people in our group about.
And you still see that though, right? I mean, you still see that in political conversations, even in mainstream political conversations. I remember it was a central theme of the 2014 elections that if Modi wins, India will end as a nation. But lo and behold, to the great surprise of everybody on the planet, India is still around. There's a great conversation. I mean, if you follow, no, in India particularly, and he's talking about, the Hindu Mahasabha will come, that danger. That narrative, it hasn't gone away.
No, it hasn't. I mean, when I talk to folks in our group, from, let's say, I have a big group of JNU people that I interact with.
Wow, you're in the belly of the beast, aren't you?
I was like, don't talk about it, don't create disharmony. For example, to talk about the Goa Inquisition. Let's not talk about it. But that doesn't mean when I talk about these things, that doesn't mean I have any anti-feeling and I have any kind of revenge feeling towards anybody. But we need to talk. I mean, it's sometimes it comes like, my wife, I have mentioned that is Polish origin, right? So there are certain things that in her family is never talked about. The German occupation of Gdańsk.
What?
Gdańsk. The city of Gdańsk.
Yes.
Okay. My wife's grandfather was, became part, because he was a teacher, he became part of the German whatever bureaucracy or whatever, and he did a lot of things without his will, and he never wanted to talk about it. But that's a different issue. But here, there's something that is part of history. We need to at least know, and we shouldn't be afraid about it. We should have the confidence that people will not misuse this kind of information. And the more we hide it, the more we run into that kind of problem that will probably bring mass about one day. I hope it answers.
No, it does. It does. And Rathee, I want to ask you as well, when we're talking about increasing the assertiveness, stop shying away from being who you are, because for so long you were talking about that we've been taught about how horrible we are and there's nothing good about us, but there are, there's parts of the Hindu population that are re-educating themselves, reigniting the sort of light, so to say, within themselves. And what would be your recommendation in that way to say that, okay, this is how we can now, in this day and age, in this time, in American society, continue to assert ourselves better?
Tough question. So what comes to mind is a statement from Swami Dayananda Saraswati Ji. So he said, what is the goal of life for a Hindu? The goal of life is to dispel that avidya from your mind about your true nature and acquire vidya. So the vidya will dispel that avidya about your true nature. That is an unapologetic statement of who you are as a Hindu on a personal journey in this lifetime and across lifetimes, knowing your dharma, trying to reduce your karma, and trying to accomplish what the goal of life is. Dispel the fact, who are you? You're part of Brahman. So this is our philosophy. It's an unapologetic statement that should not stand in contradictory terms of Abrahamic philosophies. In my conversations, Abrahamics, for example, with the Muslims, I had a long conversation with one of the preachers, and then he said there is an instance in the Quran that after the Muslim preachers have exhausted all the ways of trying to make you to convert, if everything has failed, then they're required to say, to you yours, and to me mine, and to me mine. I shall not worship that which is yours, and you shall not worship that which is mine. And we go our ways. Of course, some people later on say that is a call to arms, because that is. But the point is, in a contemporary world today, that's a place where we can find dialogue. We can say, you have a precedence. You have precedence. It's not only assimilate or destroy. You have a precedence here where you can go and be with your journey. Your journey is that you obey Muhammad's law, and that will give you if that submission will give you perhaps the heaven Jannat that you seek. But in my systems, this is who I am. Every action of mine is defined by this. So to answer your question, there's no apology about who I am. There's no apology about my philosophy. If every Hindu can articulate, a Hindu word is used to
understand, right?
Yes. So articulation implies understanding first, and understanding. Understanding is a very big word. Understanding means I know Brahman. It means I know Brahman. No, that's a very big word. But the point is that at least we know, like Swami Dayananda Saraswati Ji said, what is your goal? The goal of life for them is to obey a divine dictated law. That will give them their heaven. For us, the goal in life is this. This is what we do. So this is unapologetic. I don't think I had to apologize to anybody or be afraid it's going to cause a resurgence of RSS. Doesn't mean that because I assert my Hindu identity. Assertion is a very strong negative connotation too. But just because I articulate to you what my worldview is, it should not be seen as something that is against a Christian worldview. Why are we put through the requirement, through fire literally, to assert our identity? And the same thing is not said when somebody proudly comes and says, I'm a Christian. Wait a minute, does it mean that if I don't believe that the only way to the Father is through the Son, I'm condemned for eternal damnation in fire? Really? Why doesn't somebody ask them that? Yeah. Why wouldn't somebody say the same thing to a Muslim? But you're held to account. I think that is simply hypocrisy. Utter hypocrisy born out of internalizing ignorances, prejudices, and Hinduphobia. Call it out. I'd say just call it out. and just say, this is who I am. I don't have to apologize to anybody.
I think that's wonderful. That's a perfect place to end our panel discussion today as well. Thank you again. Please hand for the panelists today.